Say that again, Kevin. I have nothing to do with this. Right?
A little more animation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so, okay, we're not recording. I'll post this on YouTube later.
Come on, Ray, speak up.
Okay.
I'm reading this.
I'm here.
So you want to talk about race, and wow, it is, it's eye-opening, and the
Who's
chapter
the author?
on white privilege is a really good one. Pardon?
Who's the author?
It's hard to say her name, but Ejima Ula, she's biracial. Her mother is white, her dad is black. So she identifies obviously more with the black because that's what people see when they see her. And she's an activist, so to speak. So, yeah, I mean, the whole chapter on white privilege, it would be hard to not read that chapter and be like, I get it, yes, because it isn't just a white privilege thing. It could be a male privilege thing. It could be, it's wherever you have an advantage over another group of people. And just because we're talking about that Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean anybody else's doesn't. It's just that the focus right now is on this. And I think it was Phil or On Holy Post where they said something about, there's lots of cancer, but if you had a prostate cancer and someone says, well, it's no big deal. I have this, that cancer that we're focusing on right now is important. It doesn't mean the other cancers aren't important. So, yeah, I think people are really, the anger out there is kind of surprising to me.
What was actually very interesting, and this has risen to the top at GE. So our CEO, all the way up to the CEO of GE Healthcare. So this would be my boss's boss's boss. Right? It's a leader of 55,000 of us. Pretty much got all the leaders on the call and said, there is no room for any form of racism, subtle or even subtle, at GE Healthcare. If you guys are guilty of this, meaning all of you leaders, in any overt or covert fashion, you are done. That was basically, and this includes social media posts outside of work. Right? We're a global company, right? We have to be sensitive to Israelis and Palestinians and Arabs. That's always a hot button issue for us. We navigate that really well. But with all of this, our president and CEO of the U.S. and Canada, just a week ago, he was in a hotel with his daughters. Big dude, he's like 6'6", professional baseball player when he was younger. So somebody at the hotel he was staying in Vancouver made a racist comment right to his face. And all he did, he handled it well. He went to the hotel manager and told him about the incident and identified the guest. Hotel manager, very apologetic, offered him a free upgrade and room and everything. And the consensus of the people on this call as we were telling the story was that was a nice gesture, but it was the wrong gesture. They would have appreciated it if the hotel manager would have spoken to the other guests and asked them to apologize or ask them to say maybe you should find someplace else to stay tonight. I said, oh, that's elevating the game there. But it's weird in this day and age in 2020, a very well educated, tall black American who leads, he's 2 levels higher than I am, leading all of the United States. He still gets this to his face just because he's hanging on his daughters. So, yeah, I do think we as Christians have to take a stand, right? There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. We will appreciate race, not that we're talking about only one race, but it shouldn't matter in terms of the status and how we treat one another.
To me, it's interesting how the corporate world is stepping out and making these kind of statements now. Our company did the same thing. They had an hour-long webinar, and they had people speak to it. And they didn't get into details of policy or anything, but they just gave stories. They gave stories of a young black woman who felt like she couldn't be herself. And they gave stories of a white couple who had adopted 3 black kids and their experiences growing up. They lived in Minneapolis for many years and it was very close to home for them. Here, during a company webcast, the guy's choking up and high-level COO kind of guy, and it's like, wow, it was really touching to me. Wow. I think the corporate world is waking up to it and making changes.
And it's real. Do you feel it's real from the corporate world, like the message, or is it being said just so they can say we said it? What do you think?
So we took specific actions because our African American forum, they wanted very specific things. So we have hired a chief diversity and inclusion officer, a position that we had eliminated when the costs were cut. We are undergoing training with people on even, small microaggression or things that just get overlooked, implicit bias, stuff like that. And then the CEO sits on, he's Irish, by the way, so he lives in a different country.
Yeah.
He said, we should not be happy in the US until we have, 13% African American representation, 18% Latino representation, 50% women, go up by all the 6% Asian. And he's saying this is what we have to do, is to be representative of the population of your country. He specifically called the US out on it, as Irish. And said, look, we're bad in the US. We are not where we need to be. There's only one
It's
other.
supposed to be at Melbourne.
Right. Because there's only one other African American officer. There's only two in the U.S. And women, we are woefully underrepresented as well. So, it was good that he said we're not like putting targets on here, but you guys know what the target is to be representative of the population.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. Anyway, it's the good. Oh, it is
It's
the
gonna be
visceral
very much
topic
a
of
part
our
to, I think, are ongoing, because I don't think you can have any meetings where it's up any political, that it's not gonna come up.
And this was one of the chapters in
Yeah.
phase one, right? We
Right.
talked about race in our Jesus book. Very, very timely with all this. All right, let's go to a review here. So what time, we have to get done, what time?
1:45, I think is what.
Is the meeting time? And so we need to be done by 1:15 here at the latest. Okay, so we will go through and again, this is all show schedule, we're just kind of on our time, but. So if you look at your sheet here that we printed, this is a mishmash. Dean and I got to organize it into categories more, but it's a mishmash of stuff that we think is helpful for when we, just to be aware of when we're facilitating our table groups in phase 3. Wanted to review kind of the first 3 items, with media bias, intent, impact, and image, and spiritual versus legal kind of first, because I think these are big ones that we have to get right, we have to agree upon as a class before we go ahead and meet in our individual groups. So we'll do a little bit of review. And for the rest of the time, we're just going to kind of work through some of these, and we've got some different exercises that we'll show you, but let's do a quick review. Okay, so media bias. This one is vitally important because we have to understand it, and particularly when we go talk to people outside of Elmwood. We have to have the same common ground on which we interpret reality. Right? And not like scientific reality, but what's happening in reality. If we don't have that, these shared sources, we will never find common ground upon which to build bridges. But I know a lot of us who lean right, we struggle with the media. It's really hard to trust the media. And so that's why I felt this exercise was very important. I believe that we've done a good job of looking at it to say, okay, there is there's always going to be some subjectivity, but the approach that, in this case, Adfontes took, and there's others like it, the media bias fact check with all sides, that take similar approaches that kind of, take a approach that here is how you analyze the news, and ultimately this is what came out. So the general rule is we're going to say if you can find stuff that is between the center right, center, and center left leaning sources, those are generally more reliable than out to the extremes and especially the hyperpartisan areas. So that is the general rule. Center left, center right, kind of where we want to stay. And it's kind of interesting that the more center you are, the higher the reliability is. And it was kind of an interesting curve in terms of looking at this. And so what we have to convince ourselves, and we have to believe ourselves, otherwise we're not going to do it, is, look, in general, it's not an exhaustive list. You can see some of them here. But here are sources that we should be able to refer people to. If we get into a dispute at our table, these are sources that we're going to trust. AP and Reuters, NPR, PBS, blah, 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 all the way down. And these are sources that are from the center left to the center right. Most interesting thing is most local news and local TV pretty center. They don't tend to pick sides there. So tend to, again, can find them trustworthy. Now note that the term trustworthy does not mean perfect, because I know, coming from the right, some of us will want to just point out errors that these sources have. Every source has errors. There's no perfect truth. But the difference between this and the sources on the far left and the far right is that these sources, they have processes that monitor, correct, and especially retract quickly, much more than others. In fact, this ecosystem right here, compared to the ecosystem of, say, the far right, it's very self-policing within here. In the extremes, you get these echo chambers. They never refer to these as reliable sources. And so they just tend to propagate other error. Note that specifically on TV, there are voices we can trust. So just to bust a few stereotypes, I'm sure you guys have heard that Fox and MSNBC can be just awful because they're like far left if you're right, or far right if you're left. But there are some sources that were trustworthy. So I don't know if you guys saw Harris Faulkner when she did that recent interview with the president. So she's a trustworthy voice on Fox. Chris Wallace is a trustworthy voice on Fox, son of famed journalist Mike Wallace. You can trust him. Lester Holt, Andrea Mitchell, NBC, ABC, Robin Roberts, David Muir. I don't know if you guys know any of these.
I love Robin.
You love Robin Roberts.
I do.
Even on the left, Anderson Cooper and Brian Williams, MSNBC. So it's hard to make these blanket statements. You kind of have to look at each one, which is why we kind of should look. Let's be discriminating in our consumption of media, and we have to help our friends and eventually all of our neighbors when we get into phase 3B.
Is this a slide or a page that we'll have available to us?
Yes. So we'll put that there, post it on the stack. I added one thing, so this is kind of a little bit of a condensed from our media bias chart. So Wikipedia, right? Whose kids have used Wikipedia to start research? Right? Which of us have looked
It's
at
like
Wikipedia?
it comes up so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It's the first thing. Yeah.
So some people tend to discredit Wikipedia, and rightly so. Right? Wikipedia can be gamed. But Wikipedia, the articles there, and there's this great study, multiple studies, especially from a couple of folks at Harvard, who have looked at Wikipedia. And the general rule is that after you get a lot of edits, in the hundreds and maybe approaching 1,000, let's say, you've got enough people looking at it that it tends to center and become more trustworthy. But certainly something that is like just fresh or is ongoing, there's going to be like stuff added to it all the time. In fact, the average entry of an edit in Wikipedia is 1.8 every second. 1.8 edits every second. They've got over 6 million articles now in English. Okay, so you have to give something time to do this. So when George Floyd first hit, that's going to be like real time. That's not going to be quite accurate yet. It's probably still evolving now. But a topic like abortion, a topic like slavery, those have been edited by tens of thousands of times. So you can probably get a good view of what does Wikipedia say about abortion and so on. So Wikipedia, that's the caveat of using it as a very good starting point. The other thing we didn't cover is think tanks. Think tanks put out a lot of publications. They have some good research, and we didn't list it here, but maybe some other time we'll show you a list of think tanks. Here's the ones that they lean right, they lean center, they lean left. It's just good to be aware. It doesn't mean that you don't listen to them, but you just have to be aware of where they're coming from, that we think carefully. All right. Any questions on media bias? Does anybody see a problem referring to this list here or this list of people that might bite us in the butt?
Just a quick on the personalities. So we watched the program. I think it's sort of loosely based on Matt Lauer and everything's on. Are these the personalities are basically reading what someone else has wrote, right? I mean, or does David Muro actually write his news?
His interviews, you mean?
No, his news, like when he's reporting the news, that's not, he's reading, right?
Yeah, so they read it from a teleprompter. And it's a
And it's
whole
not,
set
but
of
is that
people.
his intellectual property, or is that sort of the
No,
network?
It's the networks,
It is.
right? But
But I think they participate.
yes,
Yeah, they have to agree.
They, right.
They have elements of their own opinion. Largely.
yeah, so,
Or how they
He
would
was
like
talking
to
about, we
present
watched the
something.
morning show. And it was pretty much to be Matt Lauer on the NBC show, even though they didn't say it.
Oh.
And they would disagree with what they were having to read, and then a couple times they really went off and they just did their own thing, which was
Oh.
better than what they were being asked to read, because they didn't agree with it. So that's why I think you're asking, right, because it showed that happening many times, you know, like, no. So,
It's a balance with entertainment, right? So they have to balance news and entertainment, and that's always the fine
Yeah, and
line. The
yes.
entertainment aspect is what draws the ratings, and right, so
right.
I think
and
there's
that's
always that
exactly-
tension.
Right,
the
so-
personality.
And not wanting to upset
Right.
your viewership, like,
if you notice, most of these come from the news sections of like Fox or NBC, not the opinion and entertainment section. Right, so, you know, folks like, the folks on Morning Joe, on MSNBC and Fox and Friends, probably not, they're not gonna make it on here, because they're not really news. They comment on what's happening, but they inject a lot of. So
Editorialization.
now, if you remember from the, like, analysis, opinion, and then like unfair persuasion, if you go down the y-axis, so they inject a lot of it, which is okay, free speech, but we just have to be aware, I am now not being informed, I am being persuaded. And so that is, I
that's a
think,
great way to say it.
that is the caveat that Kevin has to be aware of. And if these guys feel, and they carry the clout of being the anchors on their network, if they feel that we are now moving out of the realm of news, where our job is to inform, and into the realm of, you know, Morning Joe or Fox and Friends or Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, hey, I'm providing my view on this, which is opinion now, then they will push back. In fact, there was, I don't know if you heard of Shep Smith, he was a famous anchor at Fox, also somebody I respected, really good guy. You know, what was kind of there was he just struggled with the tough cognitive dissonance between the two parts of Fox. He just couldn't deal with it. Right? So
He left.
yeah, he left. He did that.
I just wanted to interject, it's one of the reasons I go to public television or public radio. Because you have a variety of people and not just one anchor all the time.
Yeah, and that's why NPR, PBS is
Right, and there's
listed here.
very less interjection
Less opinion.
or a
Inflammatory.
reporter struggling,
Yeah.
you know, with the information they're giving and inside and not, or experiencing cognitive dissonance to the extent that they don't want to report it. You know, I don't have to put up with that when I listen to public television because it doesn't enter into it, or very little.
And so we will have to see how this goes. I mean, again, coming from the right, there's like so much distrust. I mean, we just don't want to, we won't even like USA Today or even, I mean, just after looking at it, New York Times and Washington Post, as much as we want to stew them as, oh, they're liberal, and blah, 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 they actually have high journalistic standards.
Yeah.
So, you know, really trying hard to take a good objective look, as objective as I can. I'm like, okay, they're actually not bad.
Do you think that the same comes from the far left, that they feel that way about Fox?
Oh,
And there's a lot of jokes about Fox.
absolutely hate Fox, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I'm trying to say.
So Fox and,
Fox and MSNBC are like kind of the two, but even those aren't like the most extreme. You got like InfoWars. Ever hear of InfoWars? On the right, and then there's like the bipartisan report. Those things are really
HuffPost,
Huffington Post comes right about there, a little bit more.
a little.
They're kind of like over here. Because I won't use Huffington Post as a reliable source. Maybe if you want to read some entertainment every once in a while, but I don't. And again, just because we don't say that they're reliable, it doesn't mean they can't have some truth.
right.
Right? It just means that, look, if you're only like 80 to 90% fact and then 20% informed, you're going to be weighted as not very reliable, even though you have 80% fact. That's kind of how the scale on the y-axis was working.
Do you think you're gonna get pushback that Fox isn't doing acceptable publications periodically? I mean, it's not acceptable, the reliable one.
So
It's just the people.
Fox is right about here.
Yeah.
So again, we're not saying that you can't watch it or read it. Actually, the written part is actually better than the opinion part of the TV program. But you separate the written from the TV news from the TV opinion.
Right, I guess what I'm trying to say is that given that someone's evaluating what's left neutral, right? And if people are used to trusting Fox, and they'll say, well, look, it's biased. It's always slanted, you can tell, they don't even count Fox as a legitimate news source. That's what I'm just saying, it seemed, I mean, I know we're going with that fonts and everything, but I'm just,
You have a very legitimate concern. That's why I want all of us to be talking about this, because I mean, if you look at like point number 8, know when to disengage.
Yeah.
You just run into people who say,
right,
you know, everybody but Fox is biased, Google is biased, Wikipedia is biased, and you can't trust. You really aren't going to be able to find any common ground. And then you just focus on listening, which is okay, right? Our job is not to persuade the extremes. We want to bring, again, the people that we're inviting to participate in the class are those who, you know, maybe they like Fox more than the analysis is showing, but that they also want to bring our church, our community, our country together. Okay. I want to build on that desire. Like, there are people who don't want to bring these things. They're like, I want Democrats to go hang themselves. I want the right to go jump off a mountain, right? Those people aren't going to be a good fit for us.
You know, that, what helped me to be able to accept this was the reading of how it is done and what they do to make their decisions. And so it's a lot. It's not just, oh, I think, you know, I listen to them and he's factual or she's factual or this. And there's a lot put into making these decisions.
Yep.
So I think that helps build credibility if there's a way to explain that in that long page report that they did, but that was something. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, any ideas? I mean, many of us, again, come from the right. We know giving up Fox was, not giving up, but not having it as elevated, as high as maybe we would like is tough. How do we help these friends to do this?
About what?
taking Fox off of there as the reliable source.
No, I mean, it's the equivalent of MSNBC on the other, right? So I get that. I think it's important. I don't know what the structure is of, you know, what you intend on how we're gonna kick this off, but this would probably be like one of the first ones, right? Let's talk about the media and let's try to understand where each is coming from and see if you could get some sort of consensus there first, right? Before you begin any talk.
I think you're right, Kevin, because, you know, if somebody wants to bring facts to us and they're all facts coming from Infowars, you know, we're just not going to agree. There's no way. And like I said, I won't listen to even Wall Street Journal or Economist or, you know, that leans a little bit right. Okay, you know, I don't use Google. I don't know. What else you can do? And then it's just help with that. I wanted to show that there are trustworthy people, even in Fox and in MSNBC, because they do push back. So we do that. Okay, so that's media bias. Next thing was intent, impact, and image. So what Ina and I have observed is, as we watch the two sides duke it out and fight each other, we fight based on, you know, maybe one dimension or an initial impression. And it's helpful if we can like just take a step back. And this was a useful tool that just asked 3 different questions about some particular situation. Then you can make, I think, a more balanced assessment of the goodness or badness of a particular event. So we call it intent, impact, and image. And in journal, what you do is, if something happened, let's say, you know, I said something to Susan, and let's say I said, Susan, I think your shoes are ugly. Okay, so there's a particular statement, right? And so now you would evaluate that statement and say, well, what is Rich's intent? Right? So we would say is, how do we evaluate Rich's intent? Well, If you are talking directly to me, you can ask me. If you don't know me, you kind of have to say, well, what do we know about him from these reliable sources before, right? That's why media bias kind of came first before this. Well, Rich has a history of making callous and insensitive remarks just from reading all this. So we would kind of say his intent is maybe not that good, and we would just kind of rate it as thumbs up, thumbs down. That was a thumbs down, what he said to Susan. Okay? But if Rich, never has done anything bad, and he says, no, I didn't mean it that. Let me explain further. The shoe is ugly, meaning it's an ugly brand. Right? So I'm making it up, but that would be a way to add more information to say, oh, now that phrase makes more sense, right? So intent is the first thing to look at, and it's probably the one that is the most important in terms of coming from the executor of the event. So the next thing is impact. So now we ask Susan. Susan is the recipient of my statement. We'd say, okay, how does Susan feel? Well, maybe Susan, if she didn't know who I was, had no context, she would probably be offended. So the impact there would be bad. Now I got a negative intent and I got a negative impact, so we're not doing too well on the intent here. But maybe Susan is my friend and we both have this passion for ugly branded shoes, UGLI. And she's like, oh yeah, that's good. You don't catch that by reading a story about this. But as you dive deeper, you get, oh, Rich no bad intent, Susan no bad impact. That's okay. And then the last thing is image, which is how does it look if you just kind of swap a few of the personalities out with somebody close to you? And how does it look if you elevate it and say it was viewed in a different venue other than the two that these are, the arena in which these two are interacting? It could be the arena of your family, your church, or your workplace, local news or national news. And so this is a good way of thinking about how a specific event. Okay? So, any comments on this? So, when you look at something, I don't know, let's say, let's look at George Floyd. What was the officer's name that put his knee on the neck of George Floyd? Derek Chauvin, right? So let's look at that interaction, particular event, putting the knee on George Floyd, Derek Chauvin knee on George Floyd for 8 minutes and 23 seconds, whatever the time was. What's the intent here?
The intent of your comment or the
Evaluating
His
the
action.
intent of the action there. So Derek Chauvin's intent on George Floyd.
Well, I would say it just at minimum, it's complex.
Mhm.
It's a complex intent. It's not a singular intent.
Yes. So complexity simply means multiple factors.
Yes, yes.
So if you had to kind of just say, what are some of the top factors there? Kind of would you say, did he have a,
They
When
knew
he's
each
telling
other,
you he
right?
can't
The
read.
cop, didn't they know each other, sort of? Not, I mean, not
They
personally,
had
but,
worked together.
kind of as security
That
guards in
same-
the,
okay, yeah. So,
so mixed, right? So probably not sure, we can't say it was good, can't say it was bad. Intent is hard, okay. How about impact?
The visual impact,
Well, the ultimate impact.
perception
Ultimate
impact.
impact, clearly bad, he died, right? There's like really no.
Worldwide,
Well,
So-
regardless of his intent, the
And look
impact and perception of the visual
the
act
challenges with our
was
law
profound.
enforcement.
Right.
Now it's
Absolutely,
happening.
that goes to the image part, right?
Right,
How did this,
even without assessing intent.
Yeah.
right, even without intent being mixed, so we got a mixed score. We have impact as bad, because he died, and then we have image, pretty bad, I don't think anybody says. So we got a mixed, a bad, and a bad. The three scores together say, this was not cool. Okay, so if Derek Chauvin had this analysis done of what possibly could have happened before he did what he did, he might have thought twice about taking the action there. That's an example of how to use intent, impact, and image to evaluate, okay, if I could have called Susan's shoes ugly or put my knee in Susan's neck, how did this play out? And then that might make us help make wiser decisions. Okay, so important again in our table groups.
Well, and then if you wanna review a person's past history, when you see the officer's past history, this isn't a first.
Mhm.
He's had multiple, charges, or not charges, but accusations and paperwork, but it's all kind of pushed to the side, so.
Yeah, so
I would
we have
say that
multiple
helps explain
incidents,
his intent
it
a little
starts to
better.
take intent from being mixed to now one down. Okay, so now, but, he already had 2 strikes, you get two of 3 of these.
He wasn't fighting.
Okay, and so I would say in our table groups, when we're talking to people that we might not know, let's always assume the best of intentions. And we will ask questions to try to figure out what the intention is. It's really bad. And this is what happens a lot in the left and the right when they fight, is they just assume the worst of each other. Right.
So the intent of the individual speaking
Yeah.
at the group.
So I think that's useful for us. Okay.
That's a love, yeah. That's from the marriage, love, and respect. It was always to
Start.
first say, like, you know this person, you know their intent. So why do we immediately go like, oh, that was so bad, we go towards the jugular first.
Right, we have to, the whole point of love your enemies, right, we're trying to give the benefit of the doubt. But certainly if the history isn't there, if the person does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. If he has attacked and had a history of police violence, then you're not giving the benefit of the doubt. Okay, and then the third big foundation for us before diving into these exercises is the difference between spiritual and legal, or as we say, morality versus constitutionality. So these are really 2 distinct realms. What these that term? Just a couple images. If you look at this diagram, so this is how the country, we are part of that country. And this is not necessarily Christian, but this is how the country operates in the day-to-day life, both in terms of the activities the country partakes in, as well as expectations we should have of what takes place. So in the spiritual realm, it's based on the Bible or wherever your governing writings are for your religion, but let's use the Christian religion here. It is eternal, it never changes, and in the Old Testament, it governed Israel in terms of a theocracy. Legal is based really on our founding documents, the Declaration, the Constitution. That is, what is the highest law of the land? It's the Constitution. Right? Everything else gets interpreted in light of the Constitution. But it changes. It doesn't last all the time. Even the recent ruling of the civil rights, or not the civil rights, whatever the title, the transgender, they took a word that didn't mean what people meant and kind of interpreted it a little bit differently, right? Or maybe expanded definition, as Justice Gorsuch explained. And for us, at least in the U.S., the Declaration, the Constitution, they govern us as a democratic republic. So some intersection here, but generally we keep it this way. Not how God looks at it, right? Everything, there is no distinction between spiritual and anything else. For everything for God is, we're all under God. But this is how things will be taken care of in eternity. There's no guarantees that this gets taken care of in the here and now. But we understand that God is timeless, and we trust that He'll resolve everything in the future. So I think what we have to understand is, first of all, the Constitution, it was crafted with a lot of Judeo-Christian value kind of built right into it. Because many of our founding fathers had those values. They weren't all like evangelical Christians. They were a variety of deists. Thomas Jefferson was a deist, so was Benjamin Franklin. Some were devout Quakers, Puritans, an eclectic group of people, right? But they thought, I think rightly so, that moral fabric is important to laying the foundation for a country, and having a people who are committed to that should be the foundation of what we want to base our country. So even if the people today aren't as moral as we as Christians would like, we still have the framework of our country is crafted on that moral foundation. And that's built into the Constitution in that framework. So the second thing that we should consider here is that because of the way this works, we should not expect the government to be in the business of defining morality. In fact, we don't want the government to be teaching our kids what are morals. Right? We want to be teaching our kids what are morals, what is God's will. But certainly, like if you're a Muslim, you don't want me to be teaching them it's okay to eat bacon, right? That's not really, even though I love bacon, I'm going to mistake fair and chocolate covered bacon, but that's not going to be doing it if I'm a teacher and I'm saying, hey, let's go straight for eat bacon, Muslim kids, right? So, but you really want the government to be all about legality and constitutionality. They have to uphold the Constitution, highest law on earth. So I think one thing we've observed is Christians sometimes get confused between these two and they mix them up. They believe that, oh, the government should be in the business of legislating morality, which is starts to be a dangerous path.
Can you give an example?
Oh, yeah, clearly abortion's a morality.
That's a legal thing too.
Yeah, so it's definitely moral and it's definitely legal. It is moral because we as Christians believe that's a life. You're taking a life. But because the Constitution was based on moral principle, it also says, it'll support is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right in the Declaration. It says, okay, we have to do this, and there are some limitations as they balance out the rights of what we think was a wrongly decided beginning. But that's separate. So the other examples that we bring up here, and this is a good segue, Kevin, is there are different things that have the same word but a different definition. For example, the word church, we have a kind of our own view of what church is. But in the legal definition, church could be us. Church could be a Jewish temple. Because church could refer to a mosque. Church could refer to the first church of Satanists getting together. And so there's actually 14 tests that you apply to determine whether you're a church or not. You have to meet at least 8 of them in order to qualify as a church in the legal definition of the U.S. government.
And get your tax exemption.
And get your tax exemption, right? And then after you get the tax exemption, you also accept that I take this tax exemption from the government. It's the legal part of church. It doesn't have anything to do with the spiritual part of church. But I also agree to not endorse the candidates as of the Johnson Amendment or whatever that was, right? So that is the legal part. That's why Elmbrook has to have business meetings because that's part of the requirements of a corporation, the way it's organized, that you must have at least, whatever their bylaws say, we need to have, which is probably at least 1 year. But it's good practice to just be legal. The word marriage, also a word that is used in both realms, that could have very different meanings. In the spiritual realm, in the Christian realm, we know marriage is between a man and a woman. Marriage is meant to be for life. It's supposed to be with one partner. Marriage entails love, cherish, and putting the other interests first. Sexuality is all covered in that. Having kids. Those are things that are encompassed in this spiritual definition of marriage. In the legal definition of marriage, there's nothing that says anything about requirement to love one another. No requirement to have sex with each other. No requirement to have kids. No requirement to even talk. It does talk about visitation rights. It talks about inheritance. It talks about legal liability. Those are completely different definitions than spiritual definition. So I think what again confuses us as Christians is we kind of use the word marriage and we aren't sure which realm we're referring to. We want to defend marriage, and rightly so, but we're trying to defend the legal marriage, which is different from the spiritual marriage, and it's causing other people to feel like we are insular, we are attacking them, we are denying them happiness. When if we can separate them, it makes it easier. Because we're like, fine, you want to get married and have those legal benefits, that's okay. But you can't tell us in the church that we will ever, you can't mandate all of the churches to say we will recognize a spiritual marriage between same-sex couple or between a man and a dog, whatever it is. That would be huge overreach by the government. Force churches to to do not legal weddings, but to do spiritual weddings that go against their religion. So let me kind of pause there and see reaction, thoughts, comments from everybody here. And Ray and Barb, I apologize if you tried to say something, I've been monologuing, but go ahead and feel free to interrupt here.
That's okay. It's just hard because everything echoes. We have to really concentrate on what's being said.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, it's no problem.
Are they muted theirs or something?
Yeah, I don't know.
Never had one
We're not. Yeah, I wish I could help. All right, I don't know what to tell you on that one.
No, we're doing okay. It's just we got to focus.
Okay.
Did you have your audio on your?
So I'm going through the audio of
Okay.
that thing. Right
Okay.
there. The mic is picking up
Just echoes there. Okay.
Okay, just that maybe if you want, there's a way to chat in Skype here. I mean in Zoom here, and if you just chat something,
You
maybe
have a question.
have a question, we can look at it and see if something comes up.
Okay.
Other thoughts from
Do you think that supporting a legal marriage between two women or two men as a Christian, I mean, does that seem like we're by condoning it or saying it's okay, disobedient to God? I mean,
So which marriage are you talking about?
so the legal marriage between men, women, anything they want. If we are okay with that as a Christian, are we being disobedient to God?
So again, this is a tough subject, right?
It is a tough subject.
We would respect the beliefs of even within Christendom, right? Many denominations have split over this issue.
Right.
There's going to be some Christian groups that say spiritual gay marriage is okay, and there's going to be groups, probably like Elbrook, who will say it is not okay.
But we're defining spiritual definition in this example as between man and woman, right? It's
So for Elbrook,
Spiritual.
for us,
For
at least I haven't heard anything different yet. Elbrook still
Yeah,
holds marriage, spiritual marriages between a man and woman, and that will be what we will continue.
but churches that are divided, they
Churches
feel
divided.
there's two different definitions for
Right.
spiritual.
So we'll leave that up to the individual churches to decide, and each person to decide. I mean, my personal belief is it's still between a man and a woman. But I'm okay with, I do have friends at work who are legally married to each other. I don't make a big fuss about it with them. I treat them pretty much like I treat others. I think it's perfectly fine to support them if they have relationship issues and they want to talk to you and they trust you because they know you're a quote unquote a good moral person that they can ask for help. I think it's totally fine to do. Feel free to disagree.
Well, I'm not, I'm just curious what everybody's thought was on that. I know at first that's what it was for me. I felt like it was being disobedient to support it or.
It is a struggle for us, right? I think that's why I think it helps to be able to separate it out because we confuse it. Oh, I'm condoning a spiritual marriage. No, not really, that would go against the principles, but I do want them to have the best relationship since they are legally tied anyway. It's not like I want them to go and divorce. I care more about their relationship with God and with each other than about being right on this issue.
Right,
Because I
right.
trust the Holy Spirit to convict them on.
Which is how I've been able to change. Yeah, because God doesn't force us into doing things His way either. So why should we force others to do it?
There was a great guy by the name of Hugh Holter. Remember him? He's a pastor, and he was apparently very popular in Colorado. And a lot of couples, straight couples, would come to him for advice. These were non-Christian couples, but he was really interested in reaching non-Christians. They loved what he had to say. He didn't get on them at all about these couples living together before they were married. what they all, and it was funny as he just started reading the Bible, some of the guys said, oh, we shouldn't be having sex together before we're married, right? Isn't that kind of what the Bible is saying? Yeah. And then, just, so they kind of, all four of these couple of women just kind of stopped, they moved out in these different apartments, and then I think a few years later, they kind of said, it was really good that you didn't come and yell at us about this and let us discover it for ourselves. Because it was probably more powerful than if you had said, I'm not even gonna talk to you until you guys move this, because we would have felt like, you didn't like us, and we probably would have just
I'm gonna come back.
So leaving room for God to convict and just patiently show that, this is what God says is good about relationships.
We can do some.
Yeah, but it's not relevant.
Because he wasn't judging them.
Mhm.
He was just showing that, let them, the two of them, right, or the
As they
group
were
of them.
being
Right.
discipled.
Right.
So he was kind of
They were
taking them through discipleship.
Right.
and they-
Some weren't even Christians, yeah, and some were just becoming Christians, they were all baby Christians that he had trained.
So he withheld any judgment, and that's what kept the relationship
That's right.
from destroying the possibility of the outcome, right?
And at the same time, he wasn't saying, it's okay to do that together.
Right, he's not,
He just
yeah,
was moving forward with
right.
what he was talking.
Waiting for them to ask.
and see, good therapists do that,
They
right?
don't ask
Good
them.
therapists lead people to self,
Right.
It's just like,
realization. They don't tell them, right? They help them go to the self-realization of answers.
Does anybody want to be told what to do?
Yeah, I got a mean streak about being
I
told.
think some people do.
I mean, as
I
an
think
adult,
that's
children,
the
yeah. I
That's the
mean,
majority of people, probably are not motivated by being told adamantly what to do. And I think in the Christian community, we have a lot of people who need to be told what to do. And I guess that's fine. But I think there are many more that really want to pray through it, right? And pray for wisdom, and pray for insight.
I think it was on the last Holy Post where they were talking about how, nowadays preachers are telling you like direct messages. Is this on that last one where, but he said Jesus never did that. He never answered a question by telling them what to do.
And how frustrated they got, right?
Yes,
Very often.
yeah, they have to figure it out on their own, or they'd have to come to but the whole Bible, Jesus never told anybody what to do.
Definitely something for us to
He talked in
consider, right?
parables, it was a mystery you had to come from.
Because in the bottom, you can't see here, but I mean, our whole intent is we're trying to build bridges on the
Right.
community and country and perhaps church that is deeply divided. And if we're gonna heal, it may be time to go, okay, we don't wanna really, it's not right time to be right. We already know we're right. We want to more help others see that themselves as opposed to being told that way. Okay, so I think this is really important. We will definitely run into this one when we do the marriage topic for sure. I know this was really hard, right, for us to figure out until, okay, we're arguing about two different things here, and maybe this might be useful. I do wish this was a deep thing ahead that we would use separate words for these things, but that ship has sailed. It's just better to be more precise. Okay, so let's go on to some new things. So today, can you have the sheet here? I'm just going to quickly go through them. There were 6 exercises we want to do. We might not get to all of them, which is okay, but let's kind of go through these things, right? Less than a half hour.
That was a long review.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it was a good
But it
discussion.
was
So.
helpful.
All right, so first one, let's see. Principle number 4 was ABCs of dialogue. Be accurate, be brief, be courteous. And we have to keep it courteous in our table groups. You really want to help people to just keep everything in the right spirit here. Okay, principle number 5. The first 30 searches on Google. Inevitably, you will have someone who makes a claim that doesn't quite sound right to the rest of us, or half of us, or something. So what we would encourage, a useful tool, is just get out your phone, your laptop, whatever you have there. Let's just Google something and kind of verify it. And that's why the media bias thing was important, because what you're going to do is, let's say, we'll Google these terms in a minute here. Once you go through and just look at the first page of results, the first 10 results, cross out all the ones that aren't from a credible source, and evaluate the ones that are from a credible source and what did they say. Okay? So, some people accuse Trump made a racist remark by saying very fine people on both sides. Okay, who's heard that? Okay, we've heard that one a lot, right? So Google, just work with your partner at your table. Google very fine people on both sides of Trump. And just quickly look at the first
How
tab.
about like, to
Okay.
see,
So maybe,
guys
Lee and
do
Susan, if you guys
the
want to do the Trump one.
you guys
and-
do the Clinton
I got
one?
Hillary.
Oh, okay, you do the Trump one?
Okay, you two do the Trump one, and Lee and Susan, you want to do the Hillary one.
Okay.
Let's
Excellent
see,
deplorables.
let's see what our media training will tell us about the fuller story. Ray and Barb, I can't see you guys right now, but feel free to either Google any one of those you want, or wait till the team comes back with a few results.
You type in exactly what
So-
it says.
Basket of deplorables, Clinton.
Oh,
So when the fact comes up.
that's mine too. But then it's.
Basket of
Logs.
Okay, so let's just,
All factual.
Fact
That's
check.
it, and then,
Recording of the time, place.
And that's it, is,
okay, so first of all,
See, I
are
would
we
personally
supposed
go
to
right to
see,
YouTube.
just go to
because
page
I
2
wanna
then and
actually
see which the
hear
sources were?
that's fine too.
The context,
Time.
the everything.
That would be
Because so
awesome.
much is
And that
in
actually has
context.
Totally fine too. Here it's
There's
straight,
Wikipedia.
should be contracted, right?
Right,
This is-
exactly.
Wikipedia's general.
NPR.
YouTube. Yes, and it shows the actual thing, CNN.
What's Fox?
CNN again.
Fox kind of leans left.
New York Times.
It's okay, it's better than Huffington Post, but I wouldn't call it the most reliable source.
I mean, when I hear that there's very fine
Okay,
people
so-
on both sides. That sounds like factual. I don't know what both sides are.
So I guess. that's
Yeah,
why we started
so
looking
The
at
white,
it,
white privilege or white supremacist in.
And if you go to PolitiFact, it actually is a transcript. So you can actually read it in context.
Especially on TV.
Yeah. It's good. It's very, it puts it in context and it shows the,
So that's a good resource,
yeah,
political.
yeah,
Fact.
yeah.
So then it's not, I was thinking it was saying that the first 30 are not.
Oh, so
Oh.
we're
So just look-
That,
look
that,
at
that,
the-
that false news comes up first. I mean, that's what I hear from a lot of,
Just look at the first 30 search results. Cross out things that aren't, from reliable sources. PolitiFact, we didn't cover it, but PolitiFact is
it
generally
is,
right.
So we just checked and there's time, all the
CNN,
NPR, the BBC.
NPR, BBC.
What did you learn?
Well, basically, they're quoting her,
Mhm.
direct quotes.
Yeah.
They
What was her direct quote?
in a basket of deplorables characterized by racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic views. And then it goes on to say, to be just grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables, right? Question mark. And then Clinton goes on to say, the racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. And unfortunately, there are people like that, and he has lifted them up. And then it just goes on to keep quoting her
Oh, I
direct
see.
quotes, right?
So the statement is Hillary called all Trump supporters a basket full, just half of them.
Right.
About half of them.
Yeah, so, good, you found that distinction, but she was speaking in generalities. And if we had more time, we would have read some other ones where she actually regretted the generalization.
Yeah.
Because she was
Later
really
on,
referring
right?
to the
Yeah, later on, she
xenophobic, the
does.
homophobic, racist supporters.
Right.
Those are the ones that she's
That's she
calling
really,
for.
because she goes on to say, these are the people we have to understand and empathize with as well.
The other half, yeah. Yeah.
So this is example of real-time fact checking. You could also imply intent, impact, and image to this. What was her intent? Is she really saying that everybody who supports Trump is a deplorable? Well, no, that was not her intent. So if we reflect truth as Christians, we would have to kind of stick up and say, okay, guys, I know we didn't like this. We actually use this as like a calling card for us, but she did not mean it for all of us. That was not her intention. Here's a quote that says, she actually walked that back a bit. But she did say, if you are homophobic, if you are racist, if you are xenophobic, she is calling you deplorable. That would be that. All right. Kevin, Dawn, comments on what you reviewed?
Yeah, so the first came up with PolitiFact, Washington Post came up. I didn't read the transcript, so I don't know what the intent was behind these comments. But it seems like they weren't, but he's not a racist by saying that.
Right, I think the left is using that to say he's calling white supremacists good, very fine people. And if you actually read the transcript, he very specifically says he's condemning white supremacy and neo-Nazism. And so the left is using that, and they continue to use that as a way to rile up their base, when in fact he doesn't say that. What he was saying is that there were people at that Charlottesville event that were just didn't want them to take down the statue, because they felt that historically that statue had meaning, who were not racist per se, associated with the racist white supremacists. So that's how he was trying to, that's who he was referring to as very fine people.
Because there were multiple factions there.
Right,
It was a mixed crowd of people with mixed intent.
right, exactly.
Themselves.
Right.
And he was
It's a
just trying to
spectrum,
acknowledge.
that there were some people who are not racist, but they just historically they just feel like this is.
They were patriotic. Patriotic.
Yeah.
And he says, he says a number of times to the reporter where he says, I just said this because I didn't know the facts of who was there, and I don't want to just act on emotion and just say something, which is kind of funny that Trump would say that.
It is.
I mean, he says a hundred, you're like, wait, you don't want to respond quickly out of emotion? But it was interesting because way down in the transcript, 2 questions. Was this terrorism? And the reporter obviously just keeps pushing for their point. And can you tell us how you're feeling about your chief strategist, Bannon? Well, I think the driver of the car is a disgrace to himself, his family, and the country, and that is, you can call that terrorism. You can call it murder, you can call it whatever you want. I would just call it as the fastest one to come up with a good verdict. That's what I call. Because there is a question, is it murder, is it terrorism? And then you get into legal semantics. The driver of the car is a murderer, and what he did is horrible, horrible, inexcusable.
So in the fuller picture of this event, we learned that he actually specifically decried racism.
Yes.
Now, in the bigger picture of things, he said a lot of other stuff that is questionable, and he's always inconsistent. He's in multiple things. But when you have your table group, just really try to fact check that specific instance, and just get people to be right. Because if we're talking about immigration and people say, yeah, our borders are overrun by millions of people every day, you probably want to let's fact check that. And, no, it's not millions.
Big.
Yep. Okay, so that is a useful tool to help people kind of be more cautious about what they say without, in a good manner. Okay. Next one, let's see. We'll do double standards and hypocrisy, which will great differences.
Yeah.
Let's do that one. So hopefully everybody can read this. I'm going to.
You sent us this like a long time ago,
Yeah,
like
you
at the
guys-
beginning, yeah.
Have you guys read this article before? It's a short article.
Early
Yeah.
science.
Can you guys read this here, or do you want me to blow it up a bit?
It's good.
Okay, let's just each read a paragraph, just starting from Susan all the way down. Neuroscience reveals the differences between Republican and Democrat brains. After I read, we'll have Ray and Barb.
Oh, how about they read it?
Oh,
They haven't gotten to participate.
Yeah.
oh, okay.
I'd like to hear their voice.
All right, Lena, Ray and Barb, I don't know if you hear us, but can you read this article for us? Just maybe the two of you could alternate paragraphs here?
We'll give it a try. Can you hear us?
We
Yeah, we hear you just fine.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
No echo here.
Go ahead, read first.
It goes without saying that there are very different thought processes going on in the heads of Trump supporters versus Bernie ones. For example, many might argue that political views are largely shaped by our environments, but it turns out that our neurobiology may significantly contribute to whether we think like reds or blues.
Back in 2013, a team of political scientists and neuroscientists got together to study how liberals and conservatives use different parts of the brain when making risky decisions. Their findings suggest that these brain regions can be used to predict which political party an individual prefers, and that being a Republican or Democrat truly does have an influence on how the brain functions.
The researchers looked into a previous study that measured the brain activity of volunteers playing a gambling game, but they separated the data to compare Democrats and Republicans.
Interestingly, the opposite groups didn't differ in the risk they took, but there were striking differences in the brain activity that lit up during the decision-making process. The Democrats showed significantly greater activity in the left insula, a region associated with emotional processing as well as social and self-awareness, while the Republicans showed significantly greater activity in the right amygdala, a region that plays a role in the body's fight or flight system.
This data provides evidence that Democrats and Republicans use different cognitive processes when they think about risk. In fact, the researchers say that the brain activity in these two regions alone could predict whether a person is a Democrat or Republican with 82.9% accuracy, more accurate than using a model based on the political affiliations of an individual's parents, which is only accurate about 69.5% of the time.
Although genetics have been shown to contribute to differences in political ideology and strength of party politics, a portion of variations in political affiliations explained by activity in the amygdala and insula is significantly larger, says Dr. Darren Schreiber, a researcher in neuropolitics, suggesting that affiliating with the political party and engaging in a partisan environment may alter the brain above and beyond the effect of heredity.
Other research looked at this. Where are we at? Other research looked at the psychological differences between Republicans and Democrats, finding fundamental differences between things like morals and fears. Conservatism apparently helps to protect people against some of the natural difficulties of living, says social psychologist Paul Nail of the University of Central Arkansas. The fact is, we don't live in a completely safe world. Things can and do go wrong. But if I can impose this order on it by my worldview, I can keep my anxiety to a manageable level.
According to Niles' research, people in all political persuasions became more conservative in the weeks after September 11th, 2001, showing that fear can play a role in driving Republican views.
Interestingly, in another experiment, psychologists reframed climate change as a threat to the American way of life and talked up environmental actions as patriotic. The findings showed that the study volunteers who displayed typical conservative traits were much more likely to sign petitions about preventing oil spills and protecting the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge after the issue was spun in such a way.
When it comes to morals, research has found that conservatives are much less likely to budge than liberals. In a 2009 study, over 8,000 people were presented with a series of hypothetical actions like kicking a dog in the head, cursing at their parents to their face, or receiving a blood transfusion from a child molester. Participants were asked how much money they would need to receive in order to do these things. $10, $100,000 more.
The results showed that the liberals were reluctant to harm a living thing or act unfairly, even for $1 million. But they were more willing to betray group loyalty and disrespect authority for cash. Conservatives, on the other hand, were less willing to compromise on any of the moral categories.
On a surface level, it's obvious that Republicans and Democrats are different in many ways, but it's intriguing to delve into the psychological and neuroscience of these differences. However, Donald Trump's brain may always remain a bit of a scientific mystery, in my opinion.
In my opinion, at least.
It is. It is.
Amen.
He is a different,
Yeah,
yeah, he's just different.
thank you, Ray and Barb, for reading that. So,
He's like one guy.
what did you guys think of this?
That was fascinating.
I know we sent out a while ago, but
Well, it resonates pretty true, doesn't it?
yeah, I think for $1 million, if you want me to say the government is bad, you know, I'll do it. I guess that's enough.
Yeah, but that wasn't one of the options.
And it
I
might,
gave it a 3.
excuse me, it might underscore your daughter's friend. Right?
Fear.
The fear, that she's fearful, and instead of, talking about this with a good friend, with her good friend,
Right.
it's because her brain is telling her, you gotta get this off.
And she
You
doesn't
can't
very
invite any
comfortable
more
with it.
toxicity from this.
Because the anxiety from it is causing too much. So the fight or flight, like, just go away from it all.
It
Right?
doesn't leave a lot of room for love, right, and connection and compromise.
So the article was fascinating. I think the takeaway is, look, you just have to recognize that. We will have people on the left and on the right in our different groups. We won't know right away, but just learning that some people are wired to really, not want to hurt anything, kind of one way, right? That's the left side, aside from babies and abortion, but they probably don't view them as law, right? That's one of the issues. We have another group that really respects authority, driven by fear and order, right? That's the people on the right. So very different type of motivations. I think it's good to have both perspectives, right? Because if we had people who never wanted to hurt anything, but sometimes there is time to get tough and to defend something, we kind of need the people on the right to help with that.
Well, and I think, I do remember somebody on the left said that once they realized that the abortion issue was driven because the other person really said that is a living person, that helps that liberal to recognize, okay, if you really believe that, right, because they
Because if you believe that.
right,
Just to put themselves in your shoes
yeah,
versus
then there's
agreeing.
like, okay, now I understand why there is such, passion for wanting to be pro-life, right? So there are ways, but it's just getting the dialogue in. It's just being able to get into that empathetic, or where there's no judgment, where you can actually have a conversation of understanding why somebody believes, how strongly and passionately.
Yeah, we've been trying to teach our daughter many of the things that we're discussing in this class as far as how to have a civil conversation with one another without getting upset or, immediately like getting angry with, the person and calling names or whatever, because she is very passionate about this right now. And I mean,
Justice issues?
Yes,
Oh,
and
shoot.
I'm glad she is.
Okay.
I am too. But she is really, and she's young, and they're telling you, the young people are the ones driving this and gonna make a difference. And I'm proud as a mom that my kids are passionate about it.
More power
because,
to her and thanks
Yeah.
to you guys, because Christians should care about social justice. That's what we care.
but, when we have a conversation, Kevin and I, so I'm kind of right, left brain. I fall a little bit between both. I like facts and I have emotion. And Kevin is more about facts. So in the middle, I'll always say questions like, she made a comment the other night, like, Trump is a racist. So good luck. And she used to be a big Trump supporter when he was running for president from economic purpose and all that. But, and I just said to her, what has he done that makes you feel that way? That's all.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like, Mom, you of all people, like, you're a Christian. How can you not think he's a racist? And I said, I'm not saying he is or isn't. I'm asking you, just wait. And then she was like, why, don't do this to me. You know, and she was getting upset. And I'm saying, you know, that's just my style, that I want to understand why you think what you think. And then we tried to tell her that that's what we're learning in our class, but she just has a really hard, she gets on the defense of when you do that and immediately thinks that we're disagreeing. Why do you always have to disagree with everything I say? And it's like, I didn't even say what I thought.
Just asking for clarification.
Right. So,
And also, you're trying to help her, if she encounters other people, to be
that's-
able to defend herself
that's what I said to her
and
too.
articulate it, right?
I think her emotion comes from, she doesn't yet have the reasons why, which came out later in the conversation. Now I can see why she was getting upset, because she couldn't answer that question. So then she pulls up a whole list of things and saying it, and I'm like, oh, are these the things that you thought? And she's like, yes. So when you read the things she said, then I was like, okay, well, I can see from that you would think that. So what do you think? You know, and I'm just like, so it's been really hard at our house to have a conversation with her. Now our oldest daughter, it's a lot easier. She's a little more,
Like,
well,
Lots of-
but she's both. She's very passionate, but you can have a conversation without a lot of emotion with her. So it's just, we
It's good that
try to
you were
practice
encouraging
a
the
lot of
conversation,
this.
because that's what we will have to do. So what were the two brain parts? What's the brain parts?
Insula and amygdala.
Insula
How
for
do
the
you,
left.
what is it? Ambiguous?
Insula and the amygdala.
So where is the insula?
It's deeper inside the brain. It kind of goes around like this on both sides.
Okay, so it's the left insula for the left,
Correct.
okay.
And
And
the
where's the amygdala?
Amygdala is a deeper structure in the center of the brain.
Really deep in the center.
Yeah.
And that's the one associated with
And then, of
fear.
course, we have the hippocampus, which people don't really talk about it, but it enters into these issues. Because the hippocampus is a part of the brain that registers memory of high emotional states.
Oh.
So it acts to reinforce these high emotional states, whether you express them overtly or covertly, whether your daughter is able to verbalize this. Her hippocampus is registering this memory
She's
of
reading
this
each one of the
emotional
examples.
experience. And it'll grow. The hippocampus will grow.
I think the knowledge of this will be helpful. We're gonna have to give people a little bit of time just based on how they're wired, right? They might not be able to help, like somebody gets fearful or somebody gets like upset about life. But we have to also, I think, help them to come back and engage in the conversation in a productive fashion, as you tried to do with your daughter. You know, a great example. Because if we can't talk and we're too emotional, it's probably better to kind of back off until that flight or flight response kind of dissipates a bit, or until that passion, like, is it intuitively obvious to you? Well, it is, but I want you to verbalize it so we can understand in a logical fashion. That's probably better timing on the discussion. All right, I'm only gonna do one more, and then we'll be done, but, we can continue discussion some other time on the rest of this. All right, this one is on principle number 12 here. So we talked quickly about principle number 8, which was know when to disengage. There are times where we won't be able to have a conversation. Just know that, and it's usually when we won't agree with media bias or agree with doing a Google search. But let's look at double standards and hypocrisy. A lot of times, many people don't even know that they're being hypocritical, and they might even deny that they're being hypocritical. So that is So there we were. So here's the two examples on the screen.
Product of your marriage. It's always, I love to see people's children.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so, any volunteers for looking at the first one to come up with a substitution for the term gay couples in this phrase? Okay, yeah, I'll just put maybe Susan and Lee, if you guys want to take this first one. And then Ray and Barb, do you want to take the second one? Come up with some substitution for Christine Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh to kind of flip this and see if the progressive activist has possibly a double standard. Let's see what we come up with. Kevin Dawes, your
We'll
choice.
judge.
Okay, you guys will be judging.
Yeah,
just
that's
so
what
we
it is.
There you are.
So here's these baby couples, so my religious freedom on to adoption, to adoption services, to Islamic people. Is that where you're going, is choose a different hot
Yeah,
button?
well,
Gay couples or,
I mean, I would even say that
White
there are some progressives who would say, I don't want to allow Christians to raise this son to be homophobic,
Oh.
right?
true,
Right, that they might, like, oh, if you're too fundamentalist,
right.
that would be unfit for this child. So that's what I'm saying is the challenge.
So to play the devil's advocate,
Yeah.
so to
Yes,
speak?
this is
Oh, yeah, I
playing the
try to
devil's
do that once
advocate.
I'm at home and it's
Devil's advocate is good in these cases to just make sure we're consistent, because whatever principle we're trying to uphold needs to stand regardless of whatever names we
So to
substitute.
turn around and apply it to me, would I want that applied that way?
Right.
Yes. So white couples would also work.
Right.
Or like,
My religious freedom allows me to deny adoption services to legally married black couples,
right?
Asian couples, redheaded
Can
couples. I
see
mean,
an
yeah,
alternative
like,
situation where the outcome is just
Go ahead, Ray, say that again.
opposite.
Hey, Ray, we didn't quite hear you on that one.
Okay, well, by substitution, are you thinking of a different instance that had a different outcome?
Or different names in a similar situation. Just think of something that is a very similar situation, but note that it's a progressive activist stating the statement. And find something that would really test whether the progressive activist will hold true to the principle that if a woman just says somebody assaulted her, then that person who assaulted her is automatically guilty.
Well, I guess what comes to mind for me, if you think of substitution, is when I'm not sure, I can't remember. I think it was Ted Kennedy when he ran the car off the road and the woman died in the water, and
Yeah.
everybody seemed to think that that was okay, and basically no charges or anything was brought up against him. So from their perspective, it was okay for him to do that.
Simply because he was progressive, and so that would be an example that would say, well, okay, this is now different. You know,
I think it's something that's not a real case, but I would say to this person, let's say it's a female saying it, and I would say, well, if a woman claimed that your husband had sexually, done something at work or whatever, and your husband wouldn't do something like that, would you want him to be automatically all guilty
Yeah.
without proof? Because I feel like many of the times, because in that example, in an example, if it's another story, then they're like, well, I didn't think that. But to ask them personally, like something personal, always changes things, I feel like.
I think that's a great point, because that's a lot what happens, is that we have a certain perspective, but then when it becomes closer to you personally or someone really close to you, that really shifts your perspective, or it has shifted my perspective to be more empathetic usually.
Right.
And not so judgmental or be, yeah, in this case, due process, really, we do need, that's a great part of our Constitution, is due process.
Yeah, I mean, as I was thinking about this, I was like, well, what about
Joe Biden.
just Tara Reid and Joe Biden? Just substitute that.
Oh, that's a current one.
You gotta like, okay, if you guys wanted to do this to Christine Blasey Ford, then you need to rule exactly the same way with Joe Biden and Tara Reid.
Yeah, like
There's
Because
also
it needs to
principle.
be consistent. Justice is blind. So are you gonna say Joe Biden is guilty? That would be, I think, a good
Yeah, that's
substitution. And then here you guys came up with the good ones, like, well, what if it was a white couple? You want people to deny just because you think white people are soaked in white privilege or whatever?
Yes,
Or
elitist.
Asian couples, because Asian couples, I don't know, whatever.
Or to non-Christian, or, yeah, these things are.
The key here is we want qualified couples, regardless of who they are or what they believe, are they qualified? And here, this is the principle of due process. That's what we want to help people to be able to see. Okay, so that is all we have time for today. We'll post the slide, we'll post more. I think what we want to do, just work through the rest of this by next time.
Yeah.
When the first time when we have in the church group, in the focus groups, how many times are we looking at meeting? Did we set up a time or a
We
number?
haven't really
Set it
structured it.
up.
I think it's flexible, but I would like to.
You want a series.
Yeah, I think a series would be good, because it's gonna take time to build that relationship.
Yeah,
And
okay,
so
that's what I
the
was.
more that we can have the same similar groups, that, I think that will bode well for the outcome of what we're trying to get, is to depolarize our country.
Right.
That's,
I think, and so much of this stuff is helpful, that even having like homework or reading assignments prior to coming into a group meeting, so that you don't have to spend a lot of time on explaining all this, but you get to,
Yeah.
a meatier part of the discussion.
that could be it.
I mean, that people would, like the brain, like that example, like read this before you come to group tonight and let's discuss it, but.
I think that's good. I do know there are many people outside of Hamburg who are really excited about participating
Good.
once we get to that point.
Great.
We got to test with the number.
Right.
What's first? Can you
I'll
share a
need my
little bit?
sea legs for sure.
Kevin's
Sean?
really nervous.
Don brings up actually a good point, and I agree. I think, for Donna, I think we should be in a different group.
I
We
said I
shouldn't
don't
be,
think.
That's fine.
like I should be with Lee or Susan, and just, I think that's sort of
We
what
can mix it
balance
up, yep.
things better.
What's your question?
I guess I was wondering what you're thinking of. Do you have some outline of how you're thinking of doing it and when? I mean,
Yeah, so as soon as we can get to it. So after we finish the second half of this, then we're gonna actually role play a group. So we'll each take turns facilitating us, and some will play a role of, hard conservative or hard liberal or whatever, just to role play. But the idea is, let's say we just do we wanna do 4 sessions, 2 hours each. The first hour is dinner and get a meal, break bread together. The second hour is discussion. And pick a topic so everybody knows the topic ahead of time. Let's say the 4 sessions would be immigration, race,
So like the chapters of the book?
yeah, just like a chapter from phase 1.
Okay.
And it would be 4 of those topics, and it'll last us through, November before the election, and we'll see what we accomplish. And if it goes well, then we'll, use this as a model to eventually expand to outside of Oakland. We're trying to go beyond just the, roughly 10 of us in our little group to others in Oakland that can test this.
was your intent to try and do both Elmbrook and an outside group before the election?
Well, it was ideal,
Originally,
but I don't know if
I don't think we'll be
we'll
able
get
to. But, this is, we just want to help people have an ongoing dialogue. So even if it's not done before the election,
Which is always
it's
good
gonna
to
be
start.
divided when we have a gets elected.
we just know that the election will kind of fuel interest in this.
Right.
This is a very, very divisive time. People can really be, I can't believe you're voting for Hillary, or I can't believe you're voting for Trump. And even in your own family, like, Mom, don't let you say that. We gotta help bridge that.
Okay.
Okay. Susan, can I ask you to close us in prayer?
Yes. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to get together and discuss with Elmwood, getting people to talk together once again and bring disparate views together. But Lord, always with the understanding that you are the author and finisher of our faith and our belief in you as our Savior. And then and through this, with our ability and your help to establish this at Elmbrook, we can be radiating examples to the secular world of people in our lives. So in all these things, Lord, we pray through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right. Ray and Barb, thank you guys for joining us. Really appreciate you
Thank
here.
you for making it possible.
We'll keep praying for you.
Yeah, for your
Okay,
mom.
Barb?
That's next
You
week.
guys take care.
Thanks.
right,
Say
bye
hi
now.
to Tom.
Was she gonna say something?
Did you say something, Barb?
Oh, I just said say hi to Tom when you see him.
Ah, yes, we will. Okay, take care, huh? Bye, guys.
Bye.